When I was getting recruited, my parents wanted to help. They just didn't know how. And looking back now, after helping hundreds of families go through this crazy recruiting process, there are a few things I really wish my parents had known. Now, I went from a backup quarterback with no stars, no hype, to 25 scholarship offers. And the truth is, it would have happened a lot faster if my parents had understood these things early on. And if you're a parent right now feeling unsure of what to do next, sending emails, posting highlights, hoping a coach sees your son, you're not alone. My parents felt the same way. But recruiting isn't about luck, it's about knowing the system. So in this quick video, I'm sharing the 3 things I wish my parents knew so you don't make the same mistakes we did. Exposure matters more than talent. My parents thought if I just played well enough, coaches would find me, but that's not how it works. Recruiting is a marketing game. You see, I didn't come from a small town. I was born and raised in Fresno, California, which is one of the biggest cities in California. And being from, a major football state, now you can argue if it's number 1, number 4 between, Texas, Florida, Georgia, but it's really one of the top, at least 4 states where football happens. And again, I wasn't in SoCal, so I was not in the LA area. I wasn't playing in the Trinity League, nor was I in NorCal playing against schools like Folsom or De La Salle. But my high school that I went to was still pretty competitive and did put out kids to colleges. And again, I wasn't in a city where there was only a couple thousand people. So growing up, my parents' thoughts were, hey, you know what? All you have to do is put in the work, just get better, develop, become the best player you can be, make good plays, and then everything will take care of itself at that point. But we didn't realize until later on that that's just not the case. Even if you are in a major market area, these coaches, they need to figure out who you are first before they can actually recruit you. Now, there are definitely scenarios where, hey, you're just such a good player that you're going to get found. But realistically, it takes a special type of player to do that. And I imagine if you're watching this video, you're probably were like me, where you weren't the absolute most standout guy on your team. Or even if you are a standout guy, still coaches don't necessarily know who you are, or at least don't know how good you actually are. And so you have to realize that recruiting is this marketing game. It's not exactly the same game that it is on the field. Just because you play well in the field does not mean you will have a great recruiting process. Again, me and my parents did not realize that until very later on when we start seeing kids getting offers that we know aren't that good versus there's kids that I know as well as myself that aren't getting offers that are as good or better than these kids that are getting offers. And now you can place the blame on them and say, hey, that's not fair. These coaches don't know, or whatever else you want to cast your blames to. Or you can play the game of, hey, obviously they're doing something better than me. How can I improve? How can I make sure that I help these coaches find the best player for their program? And almost one of the biggest things is a lot of players, a lot of families, and honestly, it's more often than not the kids rather than the parents that don't expose themselves to coaches, don't put themselves out there enough because they feel like it's going to be selfish. It's bragging. It's against their nature. It's against their philosophy. And to be honest, I just think that's complete bullshit. Like, I'll just be straight up. Like, I definitely had that. Like, first off, I want to say I can relate to that. I had those feelings early on in my recruiting process where I was like, I don't want to be that guy that's posting all the time going, oh yeah, I'm working so hard, this and that. I was always I'm a relatively quiet kid, especially growing up. And I was just the kind of guy that was, hey, I was going to put my head down. I was going to work. I was going to outwork everyone. Because I was not the most talented kid. I was not the most athletically gifted kid. I was extremely slow growing up. I was relatively taller, which at least helped me. But outside of my just height and weight, I didn't really have a lot of those athletic advantages, at least early on, and I had to develop those. And so, like, to me, it was almost going against that when I started to put myself out there and started to not necessarily brag, but just started to showcase more of my talents, more of my strengths, more of what I was doing from a day-to-day basis. But again, I think that's so selfish to not realize that, hey, by not putting myself out there, I am actually hurting these coaches. Because if you truly believe, hey, I'm a player that is better than all the kids they're offering, why would you not put yourself out there as much as possible to show these coaches why they should take you over everyone else? Because if you wait too long to have that realization, it's going to be too late. And I see that with too many families, is that they just play the complaint game of like, this kid's not as good as my kid, this kid isn't good as my kid, why are we not getting recruited? And then the clear answer is just like, they haven't seen your kid, or they haven't seen why they should take your kid over these other kids. Just realize it's a marketing game. Realize you're not being selfish by putting yourself out there. It's what you're required to do. Again, about only 2.7% of athletes get a college football scholarship. So it's a very slim percentage. Just waiting around is going to have you end up being the 97.3% that don't get recruited. So make sure you're not that. Coaches don't have time to find you. For my family, we waited too long for calls, texts, emails, while coaches recruited players who were reaching out first and taking action with the right message, the right film, and the right timing. Now, I remember vividly when that contact date hit of, hey, as a junior, you can now start getting contacted with college coaches. Now, that date is now June 15th. It used to be September 1st. And so that's a big reason why like 3-game highlights are such a big deal, because it used to be like, hey, this date on September is generally when you're gonna have 2 to 3 games. And so reach out to us then, and then we can actually contact you. It still is a big deal because at least gives coaches a good batch of film, but that was mainly the main reason why 3-game highlights are so important. But I remember when that date hit, of that feeling of like not getting anything. And now, to be fair, my junior year, I wasn't even the starter on varsity. Like I didn't, it's not like I necessarily deserved any messages, but I was talking to some coaches, prior to the season, and, we reached out to some coaches and started getting some things going. But I remember seeing guys that did get messages back and did start getting things going. And to be honest, really the big difference obviously was that some of them were, sophomore, freshman varsity starters, but also they were just way more proactive with the recruiting process. Like if you looked at my Twitter profile that time versus their Twitter profile, they were just doing way more. They were just doing more volume. They were more well-known. They've been doing that for years. Now you can argue whether they started too early or not, but realistically it worked out for them. They went on to play at Division I's. They went to play on schools that they wanted to, and they were just more well-known by coaches and ultimately were able to get more traction. I just see way too many people wait around for that date, whether it's June 15th or, even senior year. And they're like, man, no coaches are seeing us. I'm getting overlooked. And it's not that you're getting overlooked. You're just underseen because you're not even putting yourself out there. Putting together a simple huddle reel and then just posting 1 to 2 times on Twitter overall is not going to get you recruited. You need to be consistent. You need to be sending the right stuff constantly, because coaches just don't have the time. Think about a coach's schedule. Think about your own high school coach's schedule. It's crazy enough. Imagine you had to go find high school kids to go recruit. It would be nuts. And it's even crazier for a college coach, because there's even more pressure for them to perform week by week. And then on top of that, they have to recruit for the future, and just so much overwhelming stuff. Now, obviously at the Division I FBS level, they have more staff, but even at a Group of 5 school, to be fair, they are still pretty stretched thinly. I mean, really the Power 4 programs are the only ones where it's like, okay, you're pretty much covering most of your bases. Like Power 4 coaches are generally evaluating, and Power 4 staffs are generally evaluating a large amount of players. They're probably evaluating, close to 50 to 100,000 players, I'd say. That's still, to be fair, not even half of a class, of a graduating class. So that means that, like, in a graduating class, there's probably 255,000 players. If they're only evaluating, let's give them a pretty good edge. Let's say each year they're evaluating 100,000 players from that graduating class. That's quite a bit. I imagine, first off, 100,000 players in a graduating class, that would mean that, let's break that up into 365. They're evaluating 3,000 players, or a little less than 3,000 players per day. That's actually not even realistic. So like, they're realistically evaluating 50,000 players. And even that's still a lot. That's still like 1,000. And when they're evaluating their players, they're obviously not evaluating that deeply. They're only picking guys that they think will be the best to evaluate more deeply. So you have to realize, like, time is of the essence. They don't have this huge plethora of time to like watch everyone's highlight videos and to watch their game film all day. You have to make sure that your stuff is short and concise and showing them why they should spend more time with you, watch more film of you. Me almost saying those stats just makes me realize of like, there's just not enough coaches out there to evaluate everyone. And so this is why it's such a marketing game. It's such a time game, because there's just not enough time for them to check out everyone. And it's why you have to be proactive, because they're going to prioritize the guys that they see first. They're not seeking out people. Like this whole idea of like, having a good scouting department really isn't a thing, because there's still gonna be gems, quote unquote, that get lost. It's just a reality. There's too many players out there. There's 1.1 million high school football players out there. You need to figure out how you can position yourself and guarantee that you get seen, rather than just hope that they see you somehow. It's not over if you're not D1. Now, being a California kid coming from a relatively bigger high school where, you know, every year we're probably putting out 1 or 2 kids that go to the Division 1 school, my parents and I thought that anything below Division 1 was a failure. And in reality, there are incredible opportunities at D2, D3, and NAIA schools that still give amazing scholarship opportunities and even full rides. For example, for myself, I was able to earn a $70,000 scholarship to an NAIA school for just 2 years. That means $35,000 per year in scholarships for a NAIA school. And again, I get it. Like, everyone wants to go Division 1. I by no means in any point in my career ever gave up on the dream of going Division 1. But I think one of the biggest flaws is that unless you have a clear reason for why you want to go Division 1, then there's no point in really limiting your options. And again, I think it's just really coming down to your goals and making sure to get clear on your goals. I think one of the biggest things as a family, as parents, that you can do to make sure that the recruiting process ends up being successful is just getting clear on like what success even looks like. I think so many families like just make up these crazy reasons. Like, I hear absurd reasons for why someone wants to do something. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Have you guys talked about that as a family and actually like decided on that? Because it just doesn't make sense all the time. Also, I'm sure your son, you know, he's probably, you know, anywhere from 14 to maybe 18. And I know when I was 14 to 18, as most 14 to 18-year-olds are, especially guys, you know, we're still figuring things out. You know, we don't really know exactly what we want to do later on in our lives. And so that's obviously an evolving process. I'm not saying you have to have everything figured out, but at least have a general North Star of like, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish out of this. You know, for me and my family, it really came down to, you know, number one, I just want to continue playing. I love football, you know, still love football, obviously, you know, help people achieve their dream of continue to play as well. And, you know, I just want to continue growing and developing as a player and a person. I thought it was just really helpful in my life. Number two was ultimately getting education paid for as much as possible. With all that, my family had supported me through the process and, you know, had paid countless of dollars, you know, traveling, going to camps, supporting me in my athletic journey. I just want to give back to them and make sure that they didn't have to pay to my tuition and, you know, go into even more financial stress with that. And so that was, to me, really my North Star. I didn't care anything about like location. Obviously division level like had some impact on that, but that was more of like a third and fourth goal of like, hey, highest level possible to compete and stuff like that. But realistically, I just wanted like a good experience of playing, you know, continue growing as a player in person and, you know, get school paid for. That was my 3 simple goals. I think some people just pick goals because like it's cool or like, oh, I want cool facilities. Those things don't matter in the long run. Now, if you have a clear reason of like, I want to go to, you know, really good school. Okay, cool. Then you're gonna be more focused on Ivy Leagues, Pioneer League schools like maybe Vanderbilt, Stanford, Cal, if you're that kind of caliber player. There's also amazing Division II schools if you're like an engineering major. Colorado School of Mines is great. South Dakota School of Mines is great. There's Missouri S&T. And then at the Division III level, you've got the NESCAC schools. You've got a ton of other higher academic schools like University of Chicago. And so there is a bunch of different schools out there. There's 800 plus. And so it's figuring out which one aligns with your goals. And for me, I never really ruled out any. I was always open to everyone. I think the only ones I really ruled out was Division III because it didn't really accomplish that goal of getting school paid for, because ultimately my family wasn't going to qualify for any financial need scholarships. So I was still gonna have to pay pretty significant sums out of pocket, even with merit-based stuff. So that pretty much ruled out for the most part Division III schools, Pioneer League schools, Patriot League schools. Like for example, Georgetown offered me and they just said, hey, it's gonna cost you $60,000 to $70,000 a year to come here. If you really want to come here, we'd love to have you, but don't necessarily recommend it. And so I agreed with them and didn't go there. And so again, it's just figuring out your goals on like, hey, do you really care about going Division I that much that you're gonna sacrifice everything else as far as a good playing experience, you know, maybe even a better degree to an extent, location, being closer to home, all those kinds of things. And that's also gonna impact how likely you are to get to your goal, because realistically, like if you don't have the measurables to play D1, especially nowadays, your chances are extremely low. And so like you have to recognize that and be pretty aware of the situation overall. I think there's just a lack of awareness of like what it takes to go Division I. And I try to bring awareness to that. I definitely am like, I hate people killing dreams, but I think it's also just being aware of like, hey, these are the odds. And so if you want to do that, if you want to go play Division I mean, again, like the odds of getting a Division I scholarship off the top of my head are like 1.3, 1.4% out of 100%. And so that's a pretty low odds just to start with. And then like, if you're not within the desired measurables, I mean, it probably drops down to like 0.01% or something like that. And so like you have to have the measurables, and then if you don't have the measurables, you have to be willing to put in a crazy amount of work to get there. So it's all stuff to be aware of. All that to be said, there's a ton of options out there, and they're all great options. Like there's no like bad options out there. I think it's just being aware of like what you ultimately want out of your process. And of course, everyone's different. You know, obviously I had my own goals and purposes and things. I think it's good to get clear on that, so that way you don't end up with confusion in the process and you know exactly what you're trying to execute on. I've helped families who thought their son had no shot, but they ended up signing to a school that they loved, not because they were the most talented, but because they followed a system that actually gets real results. Now, the hardest part of recruiting isn't the talent, it's the strategy. And most families have great athletes, but no plan, and that's what holds them back. That's exactly why I built Your First Scholarships, the same system I used to get over 25 plus scholarship offers, and now it's helped over 150 families secure more than $20 million in scholarships. So if you're ready to finally get your son noticed, click the link below to download my free recruiting playbook. It'll show you exactly what to do next. And if this helped you, hit subscribe. We post new videos every single week breaking down the recruiting process step by step, so you never have to guess what to do again.